See, I don't see there is a new student though. Like, I don't see there is a new student.
Mm.
So last time we are looking at the model that these guys came up with. So I prepared a representative model, and I also shared it with the Professor Ryan today, and he said it made sense. Since these guys didn't do well with this model they came up with, I came up with this.
Is that the same one you shared last time?
No, this is the way I reconstructed. I redesigned this messed up model. Now, this truly represents the youth out, which they mentioned is the theoretical framework for predicting the intention to adopt MOC and perhaps the actual usage. In youth out here would have been behavioral intention, and then here will be actual usage. So behavioral intention has a significant relationship with usage, and facilitating condition have direct relationship with usage. That means if students were able to get the support that they need, they will eventually use MOCs. I know you know about MOCs, massive open online courses like Coursera and the rest. So this is like a predictive model. But remember that the problem we have is here. The human capital is not well, which Professor Ryan agreed with me. He agreed with me that the human capital and the development of students were not operationalized in this model, and they didn't explain how they measured these constructs. They didn't say anything about reliability and validity of their constructs. They didn't mention anything. So if you are using a youth out model, do well not to drop any of the constructs unless you can establish with a strong justification why you need to drop a construct that defines a theory. Dropping a construct, you know what it means from 504. You might be losing some construct validity or even the content validity as it comes to explaining the model, because each of these variables explains intention to adopt. So these are hypothetical relationship between these variables at the left, which are endogenous constructs, independent variables, and the exogenous constructs, intention to adopt MOC. So if you have any reason to drop any of the variables, you have to prove why you have to do that. It's not advisable to do that because each of those constructs define the theory. You don't modify a theory by dropping, its construct without justification. And your justification might come from research. Maybe it has been proven by several research that one of the constructs does not explain, the exogenous construct, the dependent variable here. So what most researchers do, which these researchers also attempted to do is to add additional constructs. So they added these additional constructs to the util. They didn't add the moderating variables, and which they should also have added, or explain the reason why they didn't add the variables. Because most of those variables, moderating variables like age, gender, might moderate the relationship between these constructs and then the dependent variable. I think that's very clear. Do you have anything to say? Is there any other way you think you can do this? You redo this model? Now look at the question that comes with this. It's just a research in progress paper. Do you have any question about this model? Now, let's look briefly at the question.
Sorry, so you said never modify a theory.
Don't drop.
Except don't drop construct, right?
What I said, my modification is don't drop constructs. You can modify a theory, but not by dropping the constructs of the theory.
Okay.
Yeah. You can only modify a theory by conducting a research to prove that one of the independent variables does not predict, doesn't contribute anything to, the dependent variable. So that it has to be established in research. But there is no relationship, no significant relationship. No, it's not a contributing factor. Because here we're talking about factors and the mechanisms responsible for the changes, in behavioral intention to adopt. The questions that we are posed. Here is question. Oh, no, this is 2. Week 1, it says, critique the model that Xiang, et al. Are proposing. Does this serve as a representation of the ideas that are involved in the question being researched? Is it specified? Does it make sense theoretically? No way, no way. Not well specified. No way. If one wants to treat the research as quantitative and non-causal, associational, what would be the best way to think about the modeling and analyzing observation? That one would make. Discuss what will change about the research question, hypothesis, and the model. So if you want to treat this research as a quantitative non-causal, so what do you understand by quantitative non-causal? How can you treat that research? Let me switch.
You want to come up with something that's correlational, right?
Yes.
You want to correlate something like that says, hey, if one thing happens, the other one goes up, but we don't know why it goes up. Because if you try to figure out why it's going up, then it's causal, and they want a non-causal. So you would come up with maybe like nonlinear regression or something that shows that there's a correlation that's happening, and that's how you would design things.
Yeah. So a correlational study will be an example of a quantitative non-causal.
Right.
So so that would be a very good example of quantitative non-causal. Let me look at what response I provided for this particular. Then I will come back again. Where do I have? Okay, not here. This is 504. So look at what I said. I said the Young et al. Paper is not a representation of the ideas being researched. they came up with a wrong model because the constructs such as the development of human capital were not given operational definition that can be measured. The model, their model included the without construct without justification for why they choose them or dropped those they dropped. Their model seems to suggest that adoption, which is a construct in the model, moderates human capital and development. Their paper has barely scratched the surface. It is not well specified and does not make sense theoretically because they did not do an exhaustive literature review and did not specify the particular theory they use as a lens for data collection and analysis. So they didn't show how the constructs were validated and revalidated. No reliability measures and validity information was given in the paper. So if one wants to do a quantitative non-causal, so the best way to think about modeling and analyzing observational will be to identify constructs and scales from previous studies. This construct will not be latent variables because latent variables, when you are doing a correlational studies, you are dealing with observable variables you can measure directly. Understand?
Right.
So yeah, so that's why I made the emphasis. That's why I emphasize here they are not going to be latent variables, so they can be measured directly, unlike the theoretical constructs of U-Thoughts. So a correlational study will be suitable in this case. The different constructs will be measured for correlational relationships to understand how one variable affects the other. This approach does not involve any causal explanation, since correlation is not causality. The research question and the hypothesis will emphasize understanding the relationship between the different constructs. The hypothesis would be like how performance expectancy correlates with effort expectancy in studying the adoption of MOCs. So the model will involve correlational relationship between identified constructs. So yeah, this is one of the answers I provided, for the non-causal. Let me tell you, I was like, for the first time, it was in this exam that I came across this word non-causal. I never heard about any quantitative non-causal, but I was able to figure out that correlation does not imply causality. So that's how they could twist things in this exam. Things you know very well. And then you begin to feel like you don't know them again or begin to provide a wrong answer. So that's why I was able to come up with ideas. Oh, this is non-causal, and correlation usually deals with non-causal explanation of variables. But remember, like we stated earlier, your only variables that can be measured empirically, directly empirically, not latent variables. That's what you deal with when you are doing correlational studies. And you're only looking at the positive or negative correlation between one variable and another. Variable, usually use variable instead of constructs, in correlation. So measuring how one variable, changes in one variable, contributes or accounts for the observed change in the other, but doesn't go beyond. Doesn't explain the mechanism behind the change, but simply accounts for a change, in one variable and how it affects the other. And remember, when you are doing correlation, you are looking at the best line of fit. Best line of fit in a correlational study. Observable variables that can be measured directly, not latent variables. Now, the second question says quantitative causal. How are you going to deal with quantitative causal?
You can do all sorts of different things. You can use it as an experiment because experiments are causal studies. You can use latent variables, use structural modeling, PLS. The idea is to look at what is actually causing the correlation, right? So if you have one thing going up and versus the other thing, you want to find out what is causing that to happen. So there's many different ways you could choose it.
Yeah, you're correct. So, but it says, what would be the best way to think about modeling and analyzing observations that one could make? Discuss what will change about the questions and hypotheses, the model, the method to be followed.
Yeah.
You see why the QE question is a bit complicated. You are going to answer every bit of these questions they asked. So you have to know when you have answered one question and when you are answering the other and when you are answering the next. In case of this question, discuss what would change about the questions, research questions, and the hypothesis. What would change about the research questions? If you are doing one, you want to do a causal. What are the causal, quantitative causal approaches that we can use to study? Remember, they are trying to predict. Remember, the goal of this paper is to predict. It's for prediction. And every prediction involves understanding causal mechanisms. So which approach are we going to take? One can decide to model this using a structural equation modeling. But usually you have to explain why you have to use PLSM. Perhaps the sample size, or perhaps because PLSM can, maximize the explained variance in the endogenous constructs. That might be your reason. May also be your reason that this is an exploratory research and not confirmatory. And the research question and the hypothesis will be the same variables identified in this paper. Looking at the model I came up with, each of the relationship between the endogenous construct and the exogenous, that's between the dependent and independent variable, is a new hypothesized relationship. A new hypothesized relationship. So those variables at the left will constitute the hypothesis. It says, what would change about the model? What will change about the model is that the model is going to involve all the constructs, endogenous construct. In the model, we have to identify which of the constructs, latent variables, are the independent ones, and then those that are dependent. So whenever you are answering a question that has to do with a model in the qualifying exam, please do well to specify the variables. Specify the dependent and the independent variable. Don't presume that mere looking at your model, everyone understands what is there. If you don't do this specification, your model will be clumsy. Nobody will understand what is going on. So this is how the model will change. And then the method to be followed with like a PLS, partially square structural equation modeling. Let me share with you my answer. My answer, disclaimer, my answer is in no way representative of what's the ideal answer from CGU. It is only a good attempt, that earned me a passed mark in this exam. So to do a quantitative causal study, would be most appropriate for this study. Look at, that's what I said. I want you to look at the logic of writing QE exams. Don't leave any stone unturned. And like I always say, give justification for everything you say. I said a quantitative causal study will be most appropriate for this study. The best way to model and analyze observation would be to use PLSM and use without theoretical constructs. These constructs and scales will be adapted for, to the current study, will be adapted to the current study. The 4 constructs in without will be measured reflexively. I'll explain the measurement. Because the without has latent variables and the interaction terms, PLSM can be a good statistical method. I will first evaluate the measurement model for validity and reliability. The internal consistency reliability, the convergent validity, the indicator reliability will all be measured according to their threshold values to ensure content and the construct validity. A pretext will be used to validate the without model for reliability. Any other constructs added will be operationalized and retexted for measurement reliability and the right measures used. If formatively measured, then collinearity, convergent validity, significance and relevance of the parts coefficient will be accounted for, be measured. The structural model will also be evaluated after ensuring validity and reliability of the measurement model. The parts model will be assessed for collinearity, for part significance, the predictive relevance, the Q square, the R square, the adjusted R square. The effect sizes will also be assessed based on their threshold values. The structural parts will help us to identify constructs that well predicts intention to adopt MOCs, which should be the endogenous construct in the model, while the others, is exogenous constructs. So I have specified the construct. This type of approach will be consistent with the causal model, since as a researcher, I attempt to predict the hypothesized relationship in the model to know how well they predict intention to adopt MOCs. The research question will be, what factors can predict the adoption of MOCs? Data will be collected through an online survey and potential students sampled. PLSM is a very good method when it comes to prediction of, and it maximizes the splendid variance of the endogenous construct. It tolerates small samples and does not rely on assumptions like CBSM. The hypothesis will change so that all the latent exogenous construct relationship to the endogenous will be a hypothesized relationship. This is the way I tried to.
That's a really good answer, to be honest.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I try to cover everything that should be mentioned when you are using partial least square structural equation modeling. So mention everything that can be mentioned. So I explained everything. Do well to explain whatever you are doing. Mention it. You see how I mentioned the specify the constructs, which one is which, and talk about the scales for measuring the constructs. Talk about validating the constructs or revalidating them. Talked about a pretext. Talked about operationalizing the variables, the new construct that will be added, and then pretesting them, for reliability, and which also contributes to the validity of the measurements. And all those things, the discriminant validities, the reflective measure and the formative measures, you have to define which of those endogenous constructs, how they will be measured, reflectively, so mention about the structural. So mention the outer measurement model and the inner structural model if you're using PLS. One thing you will observe here is that I didn't mention all those, maybe 0.075 for Krobach alpha, for internal consistency reliability. You may not remember all the threshold values, but the way I put it is each will be measured according to the threshold values. I didn't mention any number here. So you might as well not worry yourself, about memorizing all the values. Simply put, each will be measured according to the threshold values. Simple. You know, if you want to crack your brain, learning all the 0.05, 0.709, 0.90, point, you know, Ave, 0.20, you know, not for this kind of exam, because you don't have time for those. You know, you don't have time for those. So number 4 says, what would be necessary for any quantitative research to be able to consider the goodness of observation, stroke measurement that one performs? My brothers, all through my days in CGU to the date of this exam, I never had anything about goodness of observation. I was lost with this question. What is goodness of observation? Stroke measurement. Then I began to think about what are the best practices one could do, implement as a researcher in order to ensure goodness of observation. Can you mention that? Goodness of observation and measurement. As a researcher, you don't just go there and begin to observe things the way they are. What are the things you do prior to data collection? You don't just go there and begin to collect data. What are those things you do? How do you ensure that you have measurement accuracy?
If I had to just say stuff because I didn't know, I would say things like you would study prior studies and see how the research was done, what methods were used, how they came up with for it to be reliable and good, something like that. I honestly don't know that either. I've never even heard of this word until right now.
Yeah. So that is the challenge, you know. Goodness of observation. So this is what I'm still opening 501. I should be opening 5. This is 504, right? Should be opening 504. Okay. So now, to ensure goodness of observation and measurement, one performs involves the following. Since quantitative research believes in objectivity, one must ensure that he or she does not introduce any form of bias in the study. To ensure this, surveys that are mostly used as a means of observation and data collection must be carefully worded. It is preferable to use validated scaling from previous literature, as this has reliability. Changes in words to adapt the original scales might lead to their losing original psychometric qualities, and therefore must be pilot tested for reliability to ensure consistency in the questions and their interpretation by respondents. New constructs must be pilot tested for validity and reliability before they are used in a model. Choosing the right statistical approach will also ensure goodness of observation, and a random sampling is preferable too. One must ensure that the sample size is significant to dictate any effects in the model. A poor sample will lead to inaccurate findings and may not be generalizable. There are no differences when it comes to measurement and observation in science, because objective measures are required in all measurements, and the absence of biased sample or sampling error. In the first non-causal method, the approach is most measuring direct variables, observable variables. But in the causal, it is latent variables that cannot be measured directly. But in both, a measurement accuracy is required. So I talked here about things usually we need to do.
That was your answer?
No, it is not. It cannot be shared. So
no. Okay, but I'm asking, is that was your answer?
yes.
Okay.
So my answer covers like I said earlier on, things that you have to do, in order to conduct your research effectively, things you have to do prior to data collection, because data collection is like the beginning of your observation. When we talk about observation in science, we are talking about measuring the empirically. You are measuring the attributes, of an object through empirical observation. Empirical observation is not just going there, sitting down and opening your eyes, watching things happening. The data you are collecting through survey is the observation you are doing. So sometimes it's good we understand this on a different level, in a way that it makes sense, because that's one thing about me. I try to explain things, in a way that, anybody who listens to me will try to understand. When we talk about observation, we are not talking about looking. The observation we are doing in science is the data we are collecting, and our eyes that we are using to observe what is happening there is the surveys we use in collecting the data from the people. So to ensure goodness of observation, we first of all think about our survey. Think about biases to internal validity. The last WhatsApp I posted to you, I tried to clarify internal validity. Internal validity is all about ensuring that there is really a causal, establishing beyond reasonable doubt that there is really a causal relationship between the independent and dependent variable. That causal relationship is explaining, that's the validity. But there could be a lot of biases, which some of them were mentioned in that WhatsApp chat, like maturity, like people dropping out before usually sometimes you allocate people to different groups, and then people receive treatment that they shouldn't receive, or would have gotten prior knowledge of the experiment before the actual experiment. Things like, maybe you're trying to compare neutral people from people who have experienced something, and you discover that there are some who have had that experience, but who are in the neutral group. It's a kind of bias. So you have to ensure anything you can do to ensure that there is no bias in your observation. And then the wordings of the survey has to be carefully done, because that's where the reliability lies. If you are coming up with a new scale, you have to ensure goodness of observation means that everyone understands every item on the survey exactly the same way. Consistent reliability is all about consistency across every group.
Clement,
That's what.
Were you able to find somewhere where it did talk about the fitness of good in somewhere article or literature that we could look at? Because I don't really know that really well, and I would like to.
None of our slides or papers we read prior to this exam until this day discussed about that.
Okay.
You can Google online, but I think this is a kind of question that requires your general understanding of what goodness observation and measurement in science is all about. So if you Google, you're gonna get parts and pieces of information all over the place. So this is not the kind of question where you find a particular paper that discusses it full, but you see information all over the net just saying the same thing we are just discussing now. Validating the scales. If you're adapting scales, revalidate them to ensure reliability and all that. They are necessary for goodness of observation. So you can make further research. So but there is another way. Apart from the PLSM, is there any other quantitative causal way you can use to study this?
Experiments?
Then how are you going to go about these experiments?
that really particular thing.
You are predicting
Yeah.
adoption of MOCs. Who are your target sample group population?
Yeah.
If you go for an experiment, which means you need a random assignment to a control and a treatment group. Who are going to be in the control group? Who are going to be in the treatment? The treatment group, that is the group you are going to manipulate.
No.
Yes.
There's quasi-experiment experiments that I'm trying to think what other would work.
Or
Don't know.
Are you going to do a quasi so that you don't do any randomization to assignment? You simply use existing structures. Maybe say in a school.
No.
Maybe if I have to do an experiment, I might think of, if I have to do random assignment, then I might think of group of students that have used MOOCs and people who have not used them.
Yeah. You could do a quasi-experiment by that.
Yes. So once you mention you are going to do experimental, be sure of specifying who are going to be in these groups. How many groups do you need?
Yeah.
If you want to allocate them to more than 2 groups, if you want to allocate them only to 2 groups, and you say you are going to do experimental, don't just mention you are going to do experimental. Say you are going to do experimental and you are going to do allocation to 2 groups, randomized assignment, and that you are going to use the student t-text as a statistical method for the data collection.
Right.
And that is CRP, because you said you have only 2 groups and you are doing experimentation, then the t-text. If you say you are going to have like 3 groups, then you said you are going to do experimentation, then you can go for ANOVA. If there are any variables you are going to control, mention that you can go for ANCOVA. So there are a whole lot of ways you can design this research. But I decided to toe the path of PLSM because I considered it easier for me, at least in the context of this exam. It's all about taking an approach. That's what I was telling. I told those, who took the last exams, the last Q exam. I told them there are many ways to kill a rat, but choose the way that you can be able to explain very well and justify why you chose that approach to killing. This question has many ways you can do the causal or the CBSM, approach, causal. So choose the easiest one that you can be able to justify. I use PLSM because if I said if I use ANOVA, I may not have enough justification, but I know it can also work as an answer to this question. But so I chose the part where I have enough momentum and enough information, and that's exactly what I did. Jim, Amric kind of endorsed as a very good answer. So this is 504. Any questions coming up? Any questions? Remember, today is going to be the last, and after this class, for next Monday is going to be those who paid to join. This is like a complimentary, a bonus class, because already CJU has closed for the semester. You see why this is very necessary, why I encourage everyone to join us, to explore.
for your summer thing, are we just gonna go over for previous exams? No more review, right?
That's what we are doing. Where need be, we can go to slides or pull up some papers to look at what's going on there and then come back. But our concern will be predominantly exactly the type of thing we are doing. And this is 221. When we are done with this, we move to spring 2021. Then we keep on going until we get to, perhaps we will be able to finish, before August, we'll be able to finish the remaining years. And by the time we have gone through this, believe you me, no question will be, so maybe give you a shock, like a shock during the exam, because they're going to repeat some of these things, but in different ways. Or they can bring in the essence of our trying to read through the whole curriculum at the beginning of the semester is because something new that has not been mentioned may come in, and you'll be better equipped, to make an attempt. So don't just get your mind fixated on these questions. I will always emphasize that. And Professor Ryan will always tell me, do not share any answers as a sample answer, because in the past, students memorize them and they regurgitate them in the exam hall without even looking. You see the technicality of these questions. That's the things that, like, I want you to pay so much attention to. Look at, let me just look, for example, now. See, if you wanted to treat, if you want to treat the research as quantitative and non-causal associational, what would be the best way to think about modeling and analyzing observation? One could take one question. Discuss what would change about the research questions and hypothesis. 2 questions. The model, 3 questions. The method to be followed, 4 questions. You see, 4 questions. So when you are asking this kind of question, be mindful that you are going to give 4 answers. You might end up giving an answer that doesn't cover these 4 items because of the way the question is asked. So you have to pay attention. Pay attention, pay serious attention when you're answering this kind of question.
Limit for the question number 4. It says like, are the difference between the 2 approaches discussed in 2? Are there differences between the 2 approaches discussed in 2 and 3? Well, what would be your answer for that?
The differences in the approach. Okay. Yes. Let me show you my sample. The hypothesis will change such that the latent exogenous construct relationship to the exogenous construct will be, okay, that should be the last question. Okay. There are no difference when it comes to measurement, because, which question was that? The PLSM is.
That was 4, number 4.
Okay, that was number 4, right? Okay. What would change, right? Okay, there are no difference when it comes to measurement observation, required observance in the choosing the significant method of evidence observation, random preferable, 1 measure sample significantly per model, a poor sample. There will be no difference when it comes to measurement and observation in science because of the required in all measurement, the absence of sampling error. In the first non-causal method, the approach is most measuring direct observable variables. But in the causal, it's latent variables that cannot be measured directly. Both, okay, but in both, a measurement accuracy is required. So the question says, what's gonna change, right? Let me go back to the question again now. It says, what's gonna change? No, not this. If you want to open him. Are there differences between the two approaches discussed, you know? So the measurement performs, how do one go about ensuring goodness of observation, you know? Are there differences between the two approaches discussed? That's like what I tried to, are there differences between the two approaches? Yes, in the first approach, should be measuring direct observable variables because it is a correlational study. And we are looking at the relationship between one variable and another. In the second, we are not measuring the latent variables, the variables variables directly. We are measuring them through, we're measuring the latent variable, you know, through observable, you know, scales, you know, through measurable empirical variables. So that is the difference because the latent variables are not directly, they cannot be directly measured. So they're measured in prosy, you know, through manifest variables. So that's could be a difference, you know, between the two approaches. So, and then in the first one, the causal is not the interest, but the Pearson R, that is the correlation, you know, which is a point, positive or negative. We are not studying, we're not trying to understand the mechanisms that are responsible for the observed changes. In the second one, we are trying to uncover the mechanisms responsible for the relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. Remember, the dependent variable is the intention to adopt MOOCs, and the independent variable are the rest of the utilized constructs added to that model. Yes, there are differences between the two. That is number 2 and 3 above.
Clement?
Yes.
Yeah, I do have a question for the summer workshop. Is that also going to be beneficial for the people who are going to take the qualifying exam in spring too?
Oh, sure. If you go through it now, it is already because you still need to go through this.
Yeah.
And then, like during this, those who are going to take this exam during the spring, you know, I've always advised you have to pay attention to the number of courses you are going to choose this coming semester. You know, I mean the fall semester, and you know, the level of difficulty. You know, there are courses that are more difficult, more challenging than the others. So if you are taking 2 courses, for instance, choose, you know, one that is more tasking and another one that is lesser, because it is like if you register to take 2 courses for this coming semester, plus the QE you are preparing, it's like another class unto itself, understand? Because you're also reading within the semester, because the fall semester ends on the 18th of August, and in less than 2 weeks or in less than 3 weeks, you are taking the fall exam in January, maybe 13, 14.
Right.
You know? So it's going to be a busy semester for you. So the earlier you begin preparing, the better for you. Understand? So if you wish to join us this time to go through the whole question, it's an advantage for you. So that during the summer, during the fall semester, you read up other stuff, you know. And then you sign up with me. We do it during this summer, and then I'll be available anytime to answer any question. Then we use our WhatsApp group to raise question and you know, and share. Because after this evening, I'm going to exit everybody from the WhatsApp group. I'm done with the assignment from CGU. Whatever we are going to do now is like our personal agreement.
Okay.
So,
So
if you feel that what we are doing here, you know, benefits you, you know, you join us.
All right. Also, I do have a question regarding now, for example, people they are going to have, for example, the qualifying in spring. For the sake of time, do you recommend, do you advise them? There is a kind of technique to memorizing or reviewing the materials they've been taking on those core researchers courses, like the smartest way to walking through all of these materials in those courses.
The smartest way is to go back.
Uh-huh.
That's what we did. I didn't know when you joined us. Maybe you just joined us recently.
Okay.
What we did at the beginning of this semester was to go through the whole curriculum.
Uh-huh.
We went through the whole slides that were given to us in the class.
Okay.
And then we touched upon certain papers, you know, some
Okay.
important papers. We began with 501. We discussed about Popper. We discussed about all this, all these different, schools of thought. I may call scientific currents, realism, scientific realism, empiricism, and we saw all that. We discussed about that because they are going to be bulk of, like the interpretive, the positivist. You need to understand all this. Yeah. So we started that, we discussed about Benzabat. We understand IX research, because IX research is different because we're always talking about the artifact, the technological artifact being at the center, and it's in the immediate nomological net, which constitutes the managerial, the technical, the impact, the usage of the IT. So first of all, you should know what this field is all about. So that seeing a paper, part of your critique of a paper may be like one of the papers we reviewed, like, was it this paper? I said that this paper is not and shouldn't be accepted. It's not an IS paper. No, not this one. That should be, this should be, is it Brucalia? Okay, predictive modeling. Yeah, this is the predictive modeling,
Okay.
And then look at they said they are doing a predictive modeling, and they did introduction, did literature review, no theoretical framework, no discussion on theoretical framework. They talked about methodology and data set. Okay, now they are talking about modeling to improve retention of online students. Online doesn't make it a technological artifact. That you are doing something online doesn't mean a technological artifact. It depends on what you are studying about e-commerce that might make e-commerce. Otherwise, e-commerce, for the fact it is internet enabled, doesn't make e-commerce an IT artifact. There must be something about e-commerce in relation to IT, maybe a predictive modeling technique to understand, to improve maybe bias interest, how technology contributes to e-commerce. So you have to identify that technology, which could be a software for predicting. That makes it IX. But for the fact it is online, retention of online students, online doesn't make it, or whether it's predictive modeling doesn't make it an IS paper. They don't have any theoretical framework for studying. Look at they came up with data analysis, look at their regression result, look at the no endogenous construct, not exogenous construct. This kind of paper will not even be accepted by, the future work and references. But remember, for the QE, they will always give you poorly designed papers like this one. Yes, they will also give you poor papers again, like Xiong, they did Xiong we are looking at that messed up the whole model. And then look at the model I redid. This is the way the model should look like. And I shared with Professor Ryan, and he concurred that this is good. Because they say they are going to Professor Ryan said, when I shared with him today, says they simply mentioned youth out, but they didn't do a very good job in their modeling youth out. You see, so look at this and this. This is the way you youth out use, when you look at the original paper for the youth out bucketation. Yeah. Look at the way you have the exogenous and endogenous construct, the independent variables at the left, predicting intention to adopt MOOC, and also the usage. Anyway, people write their papers depending on their level of understanding. But remember, this is a research in progress paper. So which means a research that is sent to a conference to solicit input. So, and that input is what they want you to make in the QE exams. And remember, these papers will be handed over to you a week before the exam. So you will have time. We shall have time to read this paper together and critically analyze all the papers. In fact, be rest assured, by the time we all together analyze these papers, you should have already, gotten enough information to answer. In fact, in the past 2 years, I've always predicted the possible questions coming. You can ask those who took it in the past. I predicted the kind of questions that will come, and they saw those questions in the exam hall. Because if I read the paper, when you read the paper and you discover the loopholes in the paper, already you would know the kind of question they're going to ask you.
Yeah, because honestly, I was just like taking my mind. Okay, the repeatedness over rememorizing the whole materials. That
No memory.
Yeah,
no memory, my brother.
It's gonna be impossible for just like 6 months to rememorize something that you've been taking for 2 years or 1 year.
Yes, that's something you have taken for like 2-3 years ago. There's no need for memorizing. It is all about understanding, understanding the whole thing, understanding the fundamental things. Don't be surprised if we ask ourselves, what is a variable? Some may even find it difficult to understand. Okay, last time I mentioned operationalization. One of us said, oh, I've never heard that word before. Understand? What is a construct? What is a manifest variable? What is an endogenous and exogenous construct? Begin by understanding these fundamental things. Understanding the idea of a model, a model, a conceptual model, a way of articulating observation, an abstract representation of an imaginary idea, a way of, drawing connections that are things you think that are connected to the reality you are trying to study. And then what does science say about these constructs? Explaining what they are in the paper, finding a way to measure them, and all those constructs. Understand what is construct validity, what is content validity.
Right.
Understand what is experimentation, what is quasi-experimentation, what is non-experimental. Go back, think about what is generalizability in quantitative. What is generalizability in qualitative? What is reliability and validity in quantitative, and what is it in qualitative? How do you ensure reliability in qualitative study? All these things are the things you need to go back and pick them up. You don't need to memorize anything. It all takes understanding. Believe you me, it took me all these years, constant reading and studying. Sometimes in my room here, I just think about something like the last thing I posted to you on WhatsApp that was early this week or last week was I woke up in the morning, I started reading the real world research. I wanted to clarify like something, I thought about something and it was like I forgot it. I said, let me go back and clarify again. What is internal validity versus external validity? Do you know? What's the difference between internal validity and external validity?
Yeah, but the thing that keeps me and so nervous right now to
Oh, yeah,
absorbing
yeah.
my knowledge about it.
So that's the thing. So internal validity, like I mentioned before, is establishing that there is really a causal relationship between the independent and dependent variable. Establishing that causal relationship. And this is where the problem in research lies. You have to do a good sampling. You need a statistical significant sample for you to be able to dictate effects, to avoid the two errors, you know, in research, you know, the false positive and the false negative errors. So you have to do establishing the internal. There are more threats to internal validity than there are for external validity. And external validity is all about, it's another name for generalizability. Yeah, so we don't have much threats to generalizability. Problems you might have with generalizability is all about, you know, the space of the study, you know, the population, the sample. Once you have a significant sample, you can be able to generalize. And then the context of the study, where the study also plays an important role in your generalizing, you know, the study. But there are more threats to internal validity. Even a mistake, a poorly worded survey constitutes a threat to internal validity. You see? So simple things like this could be misleading if you don't really, believe you me, endogenous and exogenous can be very confusing. Because once you come, when you are doing regression, you are talking about using different wordings. Endogenous, I mean, you are using dependent and the independent variable. When you come to a PLSM, it changes to endogenous stroke exogenous. And endogenous is the same as the independent variables, and exogenous is the same as dependent variables. So these nuances in terminology could also mislead someone to commit an error if you are not grounded in these.
Got it. Thank you.
So thank you so much. So begin now to prepare. Well, summer is the best time for this exam, honestly. I did my own during the summer. After the spring, I didn't take any other class during the summer. I spent the whole of summer studying, morning, afternoon, night. But during the spring semester, I was already reading up stuff because there are so many things, there are so much to study, too many things to study, you know. So keep on challenging yourself with more questions and keep on going back to the craft of research. Remember when we began this course, this workshop at the beginning of this semester, the first book that I mentioned is A Craft of Research. There we saw the difference between a claim, reason, evidence, and what was the last one? Warrants. Understand these four things. They will help you a lot. Because in every research paper, there is always a central claim they are making. There is, and the claim they usually make is proposed as a research question. The reason is usually provided in the literature review that establishes why we are doing this and why we made this claim. The evidence usually comes through the data collection you are providing to support what you are doing. Warrants could be additional reasoning to support your reason, additional explanations. You anticipate possible questions people could ask, but what if? So you use warrants to cover those areas. And remember, there is something I didn't mention. You know, scientists usually they hedge their statements. Their hedge. For instance, Instead of scientists saying, we discovered that the presence of this virus is responsible for the COVID virus, they usually hedge their statement by saying, we discovered the presence of this maybe a virus might be. By saying might be, which means there's some degree of certainty. Remember, science strives for accuracy, and the science thrives on objectivity, understand? But hardly can we achieve 100% certainty in science. So instead of saying, this is responsible for this, full stop, he said, this might be responsible for this. So there are different types. This is just an example. There are different types of ways, scientists try to hedge their statements. So in the craft of research, you will understand this. Every paper you are reading, first of all, ask you, what's the claim? What's the reasoning? What's the evidence? At the end, we ask, through the data analysis, we ask, did the evidence support the claim? That is to say, did the analysis, the data analysis, answer the research question? Is that clear? Am I making sense? No one is talking. Maybe it's time to go on recreation. Go on break.
No, I'm here. I'm just listening. It makes sense.
No one is talking again. I asked twice. Am I making sense? Nobody's talking. So I have
It makes sense to me.
So, Ted, you are there. You are munching something. Give me a little. 8:32. It's time to stretch our legs and think about other stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know the number of those who have signed up. I posted a link, and if you want to sign up for this for the summer, just register through that link. It keeps me to keep track, because I'm like designing a course on my website. I'm designing something that in the future will be a tutorial for me, on my website. I downloaded a learning management software, a WordPress learning management software, which I embedded on my website, and then it takes a lot of work. Honestly, I don't even know if I could be able to finish designing a particular course. It takes a lot of time and energy. So, but I've already started them gradually, with time I'll be able to finish. So please register, and then the Zoom link is there. Once you register, the meeting passcode will be automatically sent to your email, because after this night, this current Zoom link will expire. Yeah. So the one I'm going to use now is a paid Zoom, my personal paid Zoom. This one is free from CGU. The one I'm going to use is a personal paid Zoom. So you'll need a passcode to log into the class.
Did we pick a time? Is it going to be the same time, or did you pick a different time?
Like I have to know the number of students who have registered. Understand?
Sorry,
Because
you guys, are we taking break? So
yes.
We can stop the recording.
Oh yes, let me stop. Thank you for reminding me.
You're welcome.
I have to stop sharing, and at the same time, sometimes when you minimize Zoom, a lot of controls disappear. Okay, recording. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, so we're rounding up. This actually takes a lot of time. You see, imagine just one year QE, just taking almost like 2 times, 2 sections. So That's the way it's if we need to do a detailed description of all this, it takes a lot of time, you know. This is my Zoom controls.
You got 1,090 emails that was unread so far.
Huh?
You have in your Outlook, I'm looking that you have 1,000 email and 1,090 emails. Yes.
They are mostly from all these junks and spams, you know, unfocused folder.
I see.
Yeah, they're not from the focus folder. Qualifying exam 1. So now this is 543. So 543, we are given this paper to read. Study the different, if the authors had followed. This is also another paper. We are asked to use this paper. We are asked to use the model of this paper to answer the question of this paper. You know, that's the hermeneutic approach for conducting literature reviews. So in your response, consider the method, the findings, the ultimate contribution of the research. So choose and state how 2 global crises from table 2 of Gaskin and Roscreen, how would you would do a qualitative research approach? Okay, how would a qualitative researcher approach this crisis differently than a quantitative researcher? In your response, consider research question. And here is like what we need to discuss. So because the answer, no matter the paper you read, the answers are going to be the same. No matter the paper you read, these questions they ask you is going to be the same. So the bit technicality involved here is like you need to understand the paper you are reading. Understand the paper very well so that you can be able to implement all this general information that you and I already know. So here now, you're asked to make a comparison between quantitative and the qualitative research design. And then consider research questions, generalizability, potential solutions generated by qualitative research and quantitative aspects of this crisis. So now, as a qualitative researcher, approach this crisis differently than a qualitative researcher. So now, in a very general sense, how would a qualitative researcher approach a problem differently from a quantitative researcher?
No, normally we're looking for the why and the how. Like, why did something happen when we look at the research question? And then we can go into like stuff like, you know, you don't really look at objectivity, you know, like the subjects matter, the researcher matters. There's all sorts of big variety of things.
Yeah. What are the interests of a quantitative researcher? What are the interests?
Basically, I think in a quantitative, we are testing a theory. And in the qualitative, we are exploring a theory. So we may came up with a solution in the qualitative, but in the quantitative, we're just testing.
No, it's not what you said. It can be contexted. It's not always the truth. And that is not what this kind of question requires. The quantitative researcher and the qualitative researcher, you know, say, how would they approach this crisis differently? So for a qualitative researcher, first of all, you know, he's looking at the problem from a very contextual perspective. That's context.
Sorry, say that again.
The qualitative researcher looks at the problem from a contextual, subjective perspective. How does the concept, how does the context contribute to understanding the problem and its solution? The quantitative researcher is not interested in your context because context is noise. So for the quantitative researcher, he's interested in understanding, more generic, more general, factors that may be responsible for the problem or to its solution. So basically, the distinction you're making here, the first distinction you're making here is between contextual and the non-contextual. The qualitative researcher will most likely use an interpretive paradigm, philosophical paradigm, approach to understanding the reality or the crisis here he's trying to study. And therefore, he wants to get more involved with people, the subjects, in their context, in their living environment. He knows that he is also the instrument, and therefore he has to maintain a good level of reflexivity in his approach, maintaining a good friendly relationship with the people he's going to. He most probably going to use interview as his approach to data collection. And he might consider looking at documents, if need be, to gather more information about what people are unable to say or remember when he is interviewing them. So he's looking at the words, analyzing the words, analyzing the meanings, analyzing the ideologies, analyzing the feelings of the people in order to understand the problem better. He goes in depth. The quantitative researcher does not go in depth. He's approaching the problem from a positivist paradigm. And therefore, his interest is on factors and how these factors can be assigned numbers, how he can pick up numbers to analyze the problems. And he's so much dependent on a theory to guide him. That doesn't mean that the qualitative researcher does not need a theory too. He also needs a theory as a framework to conduct, the research. But the theory plays an important and a prominent role for the quantitative researcher, because he's either trying to see if there is any theory that contributes, whose construct will contribute in understanding the problem that is being studied with the goal of trying to refute or even expand the theory. While the qualitative researcher, if he's doing a positivist case study, for instance, if he chooses to do case study, he might also contribute to theory development in terms of refuting a theory. But if he decides to use interpretive approach, he might be developing a theory. Even though he has a theory guiding him, he might end up inductively again contribute to coming up with a new theory. Let me go back to that question again. We are still looking at different perspectives, of these researchers. The question says, in the response, consider the research questions. The qualitative researcher would say, how does this crisis contribute to human impoverishment in this particular organization, in this particular field? How does this? The quantitative researcher says, what factors are responsible for this crisis in the organization? There are two different things. How and the what in their research question. So their research question will be different. And the research question of the quantitative study, quantitative researcher will include the hypothesis to be investigated in that study. So quantitative studies are usually designed that they are more precise than qualitative research questions. Qualitative research questions can be very bogus, open-ended, but quantitative research questions are very particular because in that question, you can be able to identify even the variables under investigation. That is their research question. It says about generalizability. You know that the qualitative researcher is not interested in statistical generalizability because he does not draw any representative sample from any population. And therefore, he doesn't strive for statistical generalizability across a certain population of interest. Rather, he attempts to generalize from that particular case to theory. We call it analytic or theoretical generalizability. Analytic or theoretical generalizability. Generalizing from that context to theory. The quantitative researcher draws from a certain population. So he has to mention as he conducts his research the target population from which he draws a representative sample, and usually through random sampling. Random sampling, which is the best form of probabilistic sampling, which gives every member of the population an opportunity of being chosen, no discrimination. It has to be very representative so that a good number could be drawn. So in this case, in terms of generalizability, the quantitative researcher generalizes across the population. The qualitative researcher generalizes from case to theory. It says the potential solution generated by the qualitative researcher versus the quantitative researcher. Potential solution to a crisis problem. This question. This one is much more related to the actual paper. It's more related to that. So it's only when you read the paper you can be able to know. But in terms of possible solutions, the quantitative researcher might be able to come up with factors that are responsible for the identified problem, for the solution of the problem. But it may not solve the problem actually, but can identify factors that when these factors are handled, might be responsible, because that's the essence of the research for the quantitative researcher. He seeks objectivity, to understand factors that are responsible for something. For the qualitative researcher, he understands the problem in depth. He understands the problem in depth, and his possible solution to the problem might be more concrete, because he has a better grasp.
Excuse me, Clement.
Yeah.
It's Ibrahim.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry for the interruption. I just, because I was busy and I'm still busy, and when the time you're going to discuss the what is the summer qualifying exam tutoring.
Yeah.
When you, did you already did that or not?
No, I've not discussed about it. As soon as I'm finished with 543 now, understand,
okay.
And
Okay.
look at design science question. Yeah, then we are going to conclude this night by discussing about our summer. So there's still time for it. So the qualitative researcher will have an in-depth knowledge of the problem. The quantitative researcher might only provide, understand the problem from a more holistic perspective. So he has a greater depth of understanding of the problem, but he has a greater kind of a more generalized. His solution may generalize across a population, but the solution of a qualitative researcher may be restricted to the particular, contextual solution. So that's why quantitative studies, they have their own edge over qualitative research. But remember, in qualitative, we get the problem with solution in depth. We understand the people in depth. If it is a crisis, we meet with the people who are suffering the crisis on ground, where they are living, and not doing some survey across the internet, So each of them has, their own contribution to research. These are two different paradigms, but they all make up a holistic understanding. That's why sometimes we do triangulation, we do, mixed method research to understand from different perspectives and see if we can convergence in ideas. So I think these are like a very good attempt to some of these questions, So try to identify the important things when you're reading a paper like this, because this kind of question usually it comes almost every other year. You're gonna see it in subsequent years. Compare and contrast quantitative and qualitative. So and that's it, and that's all. So we go to week 2. The week 2 is the design science, and usually the design science and the integrative question are taken the same day. You may not be able to go through because none of you have read the paper for the integrative question. Yeah, so this is the day 2 section. Let me share. So this should be the final thing we are doing now. Screen sharing. Sure. So this is design science. While conducting DSL projects, it is often recommended to find a suitable kernel theory to guide your design. How exactly would you use a kernel theory, and elaborate on the approach you would take with some examples? Wow, this is the sweetest question I answered. It was the first one I grabbed, So this is a design science. Like I told you, there is something I needed to mention about the 543. 543 is usually the longest exam. It's usually the longest paper you will take. It's been always the case, through the years, because it usually involves 2 papers. You get 2 papers for 543. So this is my 543. This is a Gaskin paper, I read this paper, digested it very well, and then it's the first page. This is
So
the second.
when you answer your exam, did you start like in order 501, 503, 504, or how
Yes.
did you start?
It goes through that order. It goes through that order, yes. So the 3 and then the 4th page. So you have to, like, you know, justify. Remember when you are answering, I didn't mention it when I was saying it. When you are answering a quantitative, comparing it to quantitative, don't forget to mention the important aspects of a qualitative research, like the research question, which is already there. The question already implied that, the research subjects, the research site, the unit of analysis, the philosophical approach, whether it is interpretivist or positivist, the method, whether it is case study, ethnography, grounded theory, action research, mention it. Mention your method of data collection. You may use interviews, you may use focus group, you might also use document. Mention your method of analysis of the data. It might be hermeneutics, it might be semiotics, it might be narrative analysis. Mention maybe your mode of presentation. It could be a journal, it could be a book, it could be a conference, it could be anything. Sometimes you can mention your genre of writing, maybe active, passive, voice, and other, you know, ways. Those ones are not very important, but the most important thing should be mentioned. Also mention theory. You see where I said here we use a theoretical framework to guide the data collection. The unit of analysis will be in the collective social unit of the people. See how I mentioned it? My approach as a qualitative researcher will be to interpretivist, political, philosophical approach. The case study method. You see, I mentioned the method. My data collection method will be majorly interviews, documents, and possible focus groups of some selected poor wealthy citizens. The transcript for the interviews will be analyzed using hermeneutic analysis, applying the hermeneutic cycle to understand the whole image and the different interpretation of the past. Generalizability and qualitative research will be generalized from case to theory, which I mentioned already, you know. So for the quantitative survey I mentioned above, I shall identify factors that contribute to both crises. Potential solution will give us in-depth knowledge about the factors responsible for issues, you know. Potential solution quantitative will identify factors based on analysis of data that will be extend, modify, you know, address to all the 2 issues. So about 4 pages. So I expect that when you write a 503, don't just write half a page and say you have done something good, or write only 1 page. No, do something that justifies your conscience. After writing this paper, 4 pages, I'm sure, without being told, that I did the best I could. So finally, guys, we are on DSR. So kernel theory. So who's going to attend this question? What is a kernel theory and how are you going to apply it? I wanted to do a research on kernel theory to clarify this. I wanted to write a paper to clarify, but Professor Ryan says, oh, no, this is like beyond, it's a very vast area. You know, it will not be appropriate for a doctoral student. So I hands off. So who's going to attempt this question? How exactly would you use a kernel theory and elaborate on the approach you will take with some examples?
So, I mean, like, I would just give an example, like, hey, if I'm going to create a e-learning, I don't know, system, I would use that will teach, I don't know, online teachers how to, I don't know, teach better. I would use Bloom's taxonomy, which is a kernel theory. that is often used. And then I would describe the steps of why I would use that and how I would use it to design my artifact.
Yeah, a very good attempt. But you were discussing more of the artifact itself. You started by discussing the artifact instead of discussing the theory. What is a kernel theory? What is an example of a kernel theory? Give an example of how you can apply such a theory. That's what this
So
question is.
Bloom's taxonomy would be the kernel theory, and kernel theory is something that's already established
Yes.
to have proven a certain, doesn't matter what it is, and you can leverage that to develop whatever you want and say, hey, this is a, like you can say Utah would be a kind of a theory, right? If you really wanted to, you could use any example.
Remember, this is 40 points, which means this question requires like a page.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, like what you just said now, if we have to put it in writing, would be like maybe 5 to 6, 7 lines, which
Yeah.
doesn't justify. Yeah. So that's another thing. When you look at the question, you look at the number of points, and then the points will motivate you to know what you're saying. So this is like a question that requires like 1 full page for you to give a justificatory answer. We know about kernel theories. These are reference theories, theories that have a wider scope of generalizability. Most of these theories are either from behavioral sciences like psychology, or they could be from it could be from natural sciences. They could be from social sciences. And when we are doing DSR projects, we are concerned about building something and evaluating an IT artifact to solve organizational problems. We are not just designing projects to solve a problem. We are not just designing things to solve a problem. That would be routine design. Every other companies do it. People design things every day. But in DSR, it is a research methodology. And for a research methodology to be true to its name, the emphasis on theory is very, very important, because while the theory provides an inspiration to the design of the artifact, the valuation of the artifact is also a valuation of the theory. In DSR, we use theories on 2 levels. In the first level, in the internal design cycle of the artifact, we use a theory that provides an inspiration, prescriptive guide on how the artifact will be designed. But you and I know that there is no theory out there, no kernel theory that provides a complete prescriptive guide, for the design of IT meta artifacts. Understand? There is no theory out there. We also use kernel theories in the external design cycle. That is when we do the demonstration phase according to PFAS. When we introduce the artifact to the field, and when we try to evaluate its performance. We also use the theory to, when you're evaluating the artifact, we're also evaluating the theory that forms, that provides the principles, the prescriptive principles for designing the artifact. A kernel theory guides us, because DSR is not just mere routine design. It is a methodology, a research methodology, So because it is a research methodology, we need theory, and every theory has a construct. These constructs are different ways of conceptualizing the phenomenon that is being studied. And based on the phenomenon we are trying to provide a solution to, solve the problem we are trying to solve, usually problems identified in organizational contexts. We are looking for, we seek theories, that whose constructs will provide an inspiration and a prescriptive guide to solving the particular problem. Let's say, for instance, we are designing an artifact to solve a certain organizational problem, and we want to use the Untitled theory or Untitled model as an inspiration. Yes, the Untitled does not provide any prescriptive way of building the artifact. Like I said earlier, you cannot find a theory that provides a complete prescription. But the Untitled can be an inspiration. Now, looking at the different constructs of Untitled, we have performance expectancy, effort expectancy, social influence, and facilitating conditions. We are interested in the particular DSR project, maybe on effort expectancy. And this particular construct says that people will possibly adopt an IT artifact if it is free from effort. With that in mind, and drawing our inspiration from this, we focused on designing the artifact in such a way that it will be easy to use by the people we are designing this for to solve their problem. And this effort expectancy may come in such a way as, designing a user-friendly GUI, graphic user interface. We designed the GUI in such a way that is so friendly that people across different age groups can be able to interact with the software easily, without even need for assistance. Because Untitled says when it is free from effort, people are most likely to use it. And therefore, we design our user interface so that it becomes very friendly for people across various age groups. This is how you can elaborate. Using the Bloom taxonomy that Amrik mentioned earlier on. I know in the Bloom taxonomy, we have different levels of educational. Each level is built upon the other. The complexity increases, in each stage. You can't posit students with a problem that involves analysis, which is at the higher level of the hierarchy, if they have not, first of all, understood the concepts. So understanding must come first before analysis in that Bloom's taxonomy. And in designing the DSR artifact in the DSR project, you want to follow the Bloom's taxonomy such that the task that the IT artifact will provide the student will follow the same degree of complexity, such that it becomes from lesser complexity to a higher degree of complexity. That's how the Bloom taxonomy becomes a kernel theory informing the design of the IT artifact. By the time you finish writing all this thing, my brother, you're gonna get your 40 marks. Nobody's gonna challenge what I just said now. And this is what this question requires you to do. Elaborate on the approach you would take. That elaborate is what I've been doing. So when you're answering these questions, like I didn't memorize anything when I'm answering this question. I was simply talking and thinking. If you observe me clearly, I was talking and thinking, and that's what you're going to be doing that day. You'll be writing and thinking because you don't have any prior. Most of these questions like comes in such a way that it challenges your prior knowledge, understand? But you don't have any already made tailored answers for them. So it is a thinking exam, more or less. Professor Chatterjee would say, a thinking exam. You are writing, you are thinking. So, but if you understand the concept very well, it becomes easier for you, to apply those knowledge, to answering the questions. So now, the second question says, even during the COVID-19, vaccines are proven to be effective in saving lives and reduce hospital admissions. A vast number of folks are still hesitant and haven't taken it. This is a problem. The vast majority of the vaccine hesitant people do not have a political agenda and are not committed to an anti-scientific cause. They are simply undecided about the choice to take the injection. Researchers, even before the COVID-19, have explored various models which attempts to capture the differences in people's health behavior. One of the most promising is known as the 5 C's model, which considers the following psychological effect: the confidence, the complacency, the calculation, the constraint, the collective responsibility. The above seems to be a wicked problem. You have been brought in by local officials to come up with a solution. Specifically, they are looking for some kind of IT-enabled artifact that you can use to design, what artifact would you propose and why? What form and function? This and that. Oh, answer this question. This is 9:26. I will continue this DSR answer next Monday. But for now, I would say, for you to answer this question, think about the artifact form and the function. Artifact form is what solution are you going to provide? Is it software, hardware, or whatever? Framework, methodology, algorithm. Think about how you're going to evaluate it. Think about the form. Think about the function. What features and what will these features provide? We go into more details. We finish up this next Monday, but by next Monday we are going to enter spring 2021. I want us to take these things. I don't want to rush these things so that we can grasp, the information very, very well and digest. If we hurry this in too fast, it will be like normal class again. Normal class, 3 hours, the professor have to finish all the 45 slides. Sometimes you don't even grab anything. You don't grab anything, 45, that 3 hours is gone, So we can't be doing that. So this, like if you have, I don't know if you have read, any of you have read the link I posted, try and encourage me and then read the link I posted from my website. I said that designing this course to be self-paced. You control the duration, I want it to be like a different type of classroom, where you really take time, ask questions, not just listen. So you can get in details, whatever you need to learn. So with this, I will say thank you guys for being here with me this semester. I really have learned a lot from you guys. At the beginning, it was like, this is the first time I was like formally asked to like teach a class. They didn't call it teaching. They didn't call it a class because that may be a very smart way of exonerating themselves from certain responsibility that has to do with payment. They call it a workshop. They think they are very smart. So we are smarter. I know. I understand what's going on. Okay, you are a student. You can't say you are teaching a class. Well, what we are doing here is teaching. I'm Rick, you are a teacher. So is there anything different from what you usually do with your students than explain things like this and then you earn your money at the end? So that's their way of trying to exonerate themselves from certain responsibilities. So, but I thank them. I thank the CGU for giving me this opportunity. I volunteered a whole semester, countless number of hours before I was asked to take up this thing. So I've gathered a lot of knowledge. I've gone through the various years of this QE exams. So thank you guys for being here. Some of you that participated, and if you want to join me in the summer, workshop or summer class, there has to be, sometimes when people don't pay for something, there is some level of, complacency and I don't care attitude. They come when they want and go where they want. But I think when you pay me $30 per hour, that hour will be hour for you. You will be fully engaged. Dialogue, contribute within that hour, so that each hour that passes, your money passes, and then you are getting some knowledge. And you can always interrupt me anytime, any hour. We can come up with. You think there is something that you think, because there's not going to be a rigid, a hard and a fast schedule on what to. You also feel free to choose any particular year you want us to discuss, or if there's something you think that you need to be clarified more, we can do it in class or after class. You can also ask me. You don't pay for that. You can engage me after class for another 30 minutes or 1 hour, anytime. I will always attend to you. But for our common gathering, if we are going to meet on designated days, it's going to be like $30 per hour. I don't think it's too much, So I'm going to exit everyone from the WhatsApp group again now. So if you are interested in joining us on Monday, look at the link. I'm gonna exit everyone maybe 30 minutes after now, by 10:30, I will exit everybody. So I'll be go and register on the website on the link I sent to you, and then when you register, we get the email that you have registered, and then I will provide you other information. The passcode will come with the email, and then provide you the meeting link and the meeting passcode, and then it's gonna be like pay as you attend the classroom. So I believe we can meet on Mondays and Fridays if you guys accept it. Maybe the first time we're gonna meet, we all discuss the time. When we know the number of students who are interested in joining me, then we can discuss more of the time. But let's say we are going to meet on Monday again. We're going to meet by 7 on Monday. So when we meet, we can briefly, discuss the timing and the days, or we can meet before then. If I know the number, we can use WhatsApp and chat so that we don't waste our time, because time is money. You don't come to the class and they begin to discuss administrative issues. We can use WhatsApp and iron out the time and the day. For now, I left it Mondays and Fridays, and then so I'm hoping it's going to be like 3 hours, Monday, 3 hours, Friday, till a day or two before the exams. We continue till the day. So each time you come, I'll be timing. Once you join, $30 per hour. If you want to stay only 1 hour and go, as much as you can afford. If you want to stay the 2 hours, if you want to stay the 3 hours, it's going to be $90 for that section, and then I'll provide the payment platform. You do the transfer to my so you self-regulate yourself. Decide on when to. Once you pay, you have to be there. If you want to take 2 hours, take 3 hours, take 1 hour, take 30 minutes, and go. It's depends on you. It's very flexible. So if you are interested, please do follow the link I sent and register, and then you can also then send me a private WhatsApp message. So $30 per hour. Thank you guys, and I wish you all good luck. I know that there are some who may not join us for the summer, so wherever you are studying, if you have another group where you are studying, I wish you all the best. And feel free to contact me anytime, any day, for any questions or whatever clarification, or need a paper, or ask me anything at all. If I don't have it, I know where to get it. So thank you so much for your participation throughout the semester. We keep on joining down the road of victory, and I believe none of you will receive this exam. So you're gonna take it once, and then we're gonna celebrate, pump champagne at Amric's house, and then do a barbecue, at the courtyard. Yes, this exam was celebrating once you pass it. You know, you're overjoyed because the whole level in CGU depends so much. Once you pass this exam, you cross the other side of the bridge. You know, do your 547 and then their dissertation, and then you're over. So thank you so much. Any questions? Let me stop sharing now. Thank you and God bless you.
I think Mohammed has his hand up.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
well, I just want to say thank